Iran's drones found American bases in Syria, and the night they came in numbers was the night the rules changed. Sunday, 2:19 a.m., Al-Tanf garrison, southeastern Syria. The counter-UAS radar that had been installed 6 weeks earlier picked up the first contact at 34 kilometers. A single Shahed 136 loitering munition on a course that would put it over the garrison's eastern perimeter in 11 minutes. Then a second contact. A third. By 2:21 a.m., the radar picture showed 9 separate contacts on staggered headings and staggered altitudes, arriving from a 40-degree arc to the northeast, timed so that the first would reach the perimeter before the last had crossed the radar horizon. The timing wasn't coincidence. It was a saturation architecture, designed to arrive in a sequence that forced the garrison's defensive systems to engage one, then immediately engage the next, then the next, without the reload and repositioning time between engagements that a single-threat defense scenario allowed for. The garrison's defensive officer had modeled this exact profile in a tabletop exercise 3 weeks earlier. The tabletop had used 7 drones. The radar was showing 9. The difference mattered because the garrison's immediate intercept capability had been sized for the 7-drone model. The garrison's layered defense began engaging at 2:24 a.m. The Coyote Block 3 counter-UAS missiles launched from the ground-based intercept system took down the first 2 Shaheds at 28 and 24 kilometers. The third was engaged by a Ku-band radio frequency directed energy weapon that disrupted the drone's flight control system at 18 kilometers, sending it into an uncontrolled spiral that impacted open ground 600 meters short of the perimeter. The fourth and fifth were engaged by the Shahed Striker vehicles positioned at the perimeter corners, each firing a pair of Stinger missiles that destroyed both drones at ranges between 6 and 4 kilometers. The sixth was destroyed by a Phalanx CIWS at 1.1 kilometers. The seventh and eighth arrived within 4 seconds of each other on converging headings and were both engaged by the second Phalanx battery simultaneously. One destroyed, one hit with a partial intercept that severed its left wing and sent it into a flat spin that carried it over the perimeter fence before it impacted inside the garrison. Its warhead detonated on impact with a storage building. No personnel casualties from the detonation, structural damage to the building, and a fuel fire that burned for 22 minutes. The 9th drone had been tracking toward the medical facility on the garrison's western side. A sergeant operating a handheld drone dome electronic warfare system from the medical building's rooftop had been tracking it since it crossed the radar horizon. The jamming disrupted the drone's GPS navigation at 800 meters. It flew a wide left arc and impacted the perimeter berm at 2:31 a.m. 8 of 9 drones destroyed or disrupted before reaching their targets. 1 warhead detonating inside the perimeter with no casualties. By any objective measure, the defense had performed above its design parameters. The garrison commander who wrote the after-action report began it with that assessment and spent the next 14 pages explaining why it was insufficient as a strategic conclusion. The defense had performed above design parameters against a 9-drone saturation attack. The design parameters had been set for a 7-drone attack. The attack had been 9 drones. The next attack could be 12, could be 16, could be a mixed package with different drone types, different altitudes, different approach timings, different warhead configurations targeting the specific systems that had defended most effectively. The attackers had learned from every previous engagement what the defense could handle. They were iterating toward an attack the defense couldn't. The after-action report's final paragraph was a request for additional intercept capacity. The request arrived at Central Command at the same time as 8 similar requests from 6 other American bases across Syria and Iraq that had been struck in the same 90-minute window. Subscribe to my channel and hit the bell. Every target in this operation, every decision that shaped the response, every system on both sides, broken down at the level the news coverage doesn't reach. The coordinated nature of the attack across 7 bases in a single 90-minute window was the operational development that changed the assessment from a defensive success to a strategic warning. Previous IRGCN drone attacks on American positions in the region had been sequenced over days and weeks. One base, a few days later another, a pattern that allowed American defensive measures to be adjusted between attacks and that kept each attack below the threshold that had historically triggered a kinetic American response. The 7-base simultaneous attack was not below any threshold. It was a statement. It said that the IRGCN had been accumulating the planning, the logistics, and the drone inventory required to execute simultaneous multi-base operations and had chosen this night to demonstrate that capability existed. The statement was communicated through the detonation of 41 Shahed warheads across American military infrastructure in a single night. 41 detonations, 3 American soldiers wounded at a base in eastern Syria where 1 drone defeated the defensive intercept chain. No fatalities, but 41 detonations were 41 data points that the Central Command commander was looking at on a status board at 4 a.m. And the data points told a story that was independent of the casualty count. What's your call? Type A if the U.S. response should target the drone launch sites and logistics chain specifically. Type B if a broader strike on IRGCN infrastructure was required to change the attack pattern. Drop your answer below. The drone program that had executed the 7-base attack had been developing for years under a combination of Iranian domestic development and technology transfer from Russia and China. The Shahed 136, the platform used in the majority of attacks, was a delta-wing loitering munition with a 50-kilogram warhead, a range of 2,500 kilometers on its internal fuel, and a guidance system that combined inertial navigation with GPS terminal homing. Its unit cost was approximately $20,000. The intercept cost for each Shahed destroyed by a Coyote or Stinger missile was between $90,000 and $150,000, depending on the specific interceptor used. The Phalanx CIWS engagement cost approximately $30 per round of 20 mm ammunition fired. The cost asymmetry was a deliberate feature of the IRGCN attack design, not the specific cost figures, but the principle that cheap offensive capability attriting expensive defensive capacity was a favorable exchange rate for the attacker and an unsustainable one for the defender if sustained over enough engagements. The American defensive systems at Al-Tanf and across the 6 other bases were sophisticated and effective. They were also consuming expensive interceptors to defeat inexpensive drones. And the IRGCN had more drones than the American bases had interceptors per reload cycle. The response to the 7-base attack went through an authorization process that ran faster than any previous IRGCN drone attack authorization had, reflecting both the cumulative frustration with the attack pattern and the strategic shift represented by simultaneous multi-base operations. The National Security Council convened at 6 a.m. The target package that had been prepared by Central Command's targeting cells was presented at 7:30 a.m. 6 target categories. The drone production and storage facilities in Iran that had been assessed as the primary source of the Shahed 136 inventory used in the previous 6 months of attacks, 3 facilities, 2 in Isfahan province, 1 in Loristan province. The forward logistics sites in Syria and Iraq through which the drones were transited from Iranian territory to the launch areas. 4 sites, 2 in eastern Syria, 2 in western Iraq. The IRGCN command nodes that had coordinated the simultaneous 7-base operation, assessed with high confidence at 2 locations. The mobile launch teams themselves, 6 identified, 4 with current location fixes from ISR collection that had been tracking drone launch signatures across the previous night's attacks. The communications infrastructure supporting the drone program's coordination network, and the training facilities where IRGCN instructors had been developing the operational planning capability to execute simultaneous multi-base attacks, a capability that hadn't existed 18 months earlier and had been built at identifiable facilities whose locations American intelligence had been tracking. The authorization was granted at 9:15 a.m. The targeting package launched at 11:30 p.m. that night, 14 hours from authorization to first weapon employment, a timeline shaped by the need to position strike aircraft, coordinate the simultaneous time-on-target windows required to prevent the mobile elements from dispersing after the first strikes were detected, and allow the ISR platform sufficient collection time to confirm the current location fixes on the mobile launch teams. The strikes ran for 2 hours and 12 minutes across a geographic area covering 1,400 kilometers from northeastern Syria to central Iran. 53 individual aim points. The production facilities in Isfahan and Loristan were struck by B-2 Spirit bombers carrying bunker-penetrating munitions against the underground storage sections of each facility. The forward logistics sites were struck by JASSM-ER cruise missiles that had been pre-positioned on B-52H bombers operating from Diego Garcia. The mobile launch teams and the command nodes were struck by F-15RE Strike Eagles operating from Al-Udeid with JDAM-equipped GBU-31s. The battle damage assessment completed at 6:00 a.m. the following morning confirmed the production facilities damaged at levels that the engineering assessment estimated would require 6 to 12 months to restore to operational capacity. The forward logistics sites were destroyed. All 6 mobile launch teams had been engaged, 4 confirmed destroyed, 2 assessed as probable kills with the remaining uncertainty from the darkness and terrain conditions at the strike time. The command nodes were both confirmed destroyed. The communications infrastructure supporting the coordination network was assessed as severely degraded with significant gaps in coverage across the previously mapped network. 53 aim points. The drone program infrastructure that had executed 41 detonations in a single night had been degraded to a level that Central Command assessed would prevent a repeat of the simultaneous multi-base operation for a minimum of 4 months while the production and logistics chain was rebuilt. The 3 American soldiers wounded at the eastern Syria base during the attack had been treated at the base medical facility. 2 had shrapnel injuries assessed as non-life-threatening. 1 had a blast injury from the proximity of the detonation that produced a traumatic brain injury requiring medical evacuation to Landstuhl Regional Medical Center in Germany. He was airborne within 4 hours of the attack. The injury was serious. He survived. The garrison commanders across the 7 affected bases were each filing separate incident reports that would feed into an assessment of what had changed in the IRGCN drone program between the previous month's attack pattern and the simultaneous multi-base operation. The assessment identified 3 specific changes. The first was operational planning capacity. The ability to coordinate 7 simultaneous attack packages against geographically dispersed targets required planning staff, communication security, and logistical synchronization that the IRGCN had not previously demonstrated at this scale. The second was drone inventory. Executing 7 simultaneous attacks using the volume deployed implied a stockpile larger than previous consumption rate analysis had projected. The third was target intelligence. The approach vectors, timing sequences, and targeting of specific facilities within each base reflected a level of pre-attack reconnaissance that suggested persistent ISR collection against American positions that had been running for longer than the attack planning cycle. The persistent ISR collection assessment was the most operationally concerning of the 3 changes. A capability that could plan simultaneous multi-base attacks was a planning and logistics problem that strikes on the planning infrastructure could address. A capability that had been systematically collecting against American-based layouts, facility functions, personnel patterns in defensive system positions for months before executing the attack was a collection program that lived in sensors and communications networks distributed across the region and was harder to address with a single strike package. The collection had informed the attack. The attack's specific aim points: the storage building that the partial Shahed intercept hit at Al-Tanf, the fuel infrastructure targeted at 2 of the other bases, the communications facilities targeted at a third, reflected knowledge of base layout that hadn't been publicly available. The intelligence about the collection program that had produced that knowledge became a priority requirement for the Central Command intelligence cells in the days after the attack, shaping a follow-on targeting effort that operated over the subsequent 3 weeks against the signals collection infrastructure that had been feeding the IRGCN's base targeting picture. What would you do as the American base commander who just survived a 9-drone saturation attack with 1 warhead inside your perimeter? And you know the next attack could be 12 drones or 16? Comment your defensive priority below. The counter-UAS technology landscape that the Al-Tanf garrison's defensive system represented was itself the product of an accelerated development program that had been running since the first serious IRGCN drone attacks on American positions 18 months earlier. The Coyote Block 3, the Kuban directed energy system, the integration of electronic warfare jamming with kinetic intercept capability in a layered architecture that addressed threats from different ranges and different threat profiles with different response tools. The development had been fast by acquisition standards, 15 months from initial requirement to fielded capability at the forward bases. Fast enough to be present at Al-Tanf when the 9-drone attack arrived. Not fast enough to have the capacity that a 9-drone simultaneous attack revealed as the new requirement. The garrison's defensive officer's after-action report requesting additional capacity was the front end of an acquisition cycle that would take another 12 months to produce the fielded capability that the 9-drone attack had proved necessary. In those 12 months, the IRGCN would be iterating its attack design against the defensive picture it had already mapped. The cost exchange problem that the Shahed's $20,000 unit cost created against American intercept systems had been the subject of analysis in American defense planning circles since the first significant drone attacks on American positions. The analytical consensus was that the cost exchange was unsustainable if the defensive response relied exclusively on expensive kinetic interceptors. The solution set under development had 3 components. First, directed energy weapons, laser and microwave systems that could engage drones at a cost measured in dollars per shot rather than thousands of dollars per interceptor. Second, hardening, physical protection of critical facilities that reduce the consequence of a successful drone penetration, lowering the strategic value of each individual Shahed detonation, and reducing the drone's effectiveness as a cost imposition tool. Third, offensive operations against the drone supply chain. The targeting package that had struck the production and logistics infrastructure was not a one-time solution, but the first iteration of a sustained campaign designed to keep the IRGCN's drone inventory and production capacity below the threshold required for multi-base simultaneous operations. The directed energy component was the most consequential long-term solution and the one furthest from operational maturity at the time of the Al-Tanf attack. High-energy laser systems capable of defeating Shahed-class drones existed in laboratory and early fielding configurations. They had demonstrated kill capability against Shahed-type targets in controlled test environments. They had not been deployed to forward operating bases in sufficient numbers to constitute a layer of the garrison defense. The acquisition and fielding timeline was 12 to 18 months for the first operationally capable systems at the highest priority bases. The directed energy solution was coming. It was not present on the Sunday night when 9 Shaheds crossed the radar horizon at Al-Tanf. The garrison had defended with what existed. What existed had been enough, barely, against 9 drones. What came next would need to be enough against more. Don't miss the follow-up breakdown on the directed energy programs under development and the IRGCN's drone program rebuild after the strikes. Subscribe to my channel and hit that bell. The Al-Tanf after-action report's request for additional intercept capacity was approved within a week and produced additional Coyote launchers, a second directed energy system, and a third Phalanx CIWS installation covering the western approach that the 9th drone's flat arc had exposed as a gap. The upgrades arrived 41 days after the attack. In those 41 days, the IRGCN conducted 4 smaller drone attacks against American positions in the region, none at the simultaneous multi-base scale, all at the reduced intensity that the strikes on production and logistics infrastructure had forced by limiting available inventory. The 4 attacks produced 2 successful drone detonations and 7 intercepts. The production and logistics disruption was visible in the reduced attack tempo and the smaller package sizes. It was not permanent. The IRGCN was rebuilding. The drone program that had executed 41 detonations in a 90-minute window on a Sunday night was the product of years of development, technology transfer, and operational learning from every previous engagement against American defensive systems. It had been set back by the strike package. It had not been stopped. Stopped and set back are different strategic outcomes with different implications for every planning decision that follows. Stopped means the defensive investment is complete and the problem is resolved. Setback means the problem has been delayed and the investment continues in parallel with the attacker's rebuild. The Central Command commander's assessment at the end of the 41-day period since the attack was that the problem had been set back by 4 to 6 months and would require continued offensive pressure on the production and logistics infrastructure to prevent the simultaneous multi-base capability from reconstituting to the level the Sunday attack had demonstrated. Set back, not stopped. The 41 detonations had been expensive to answer. The answer had bought time. Time is what you do with it. Was the American response a strike package that degraded the drone program for 4 to 6 months? The right scale of operation? Or did the simultaneous 7-base attack justify a larger campaign that imposed longer-lasting damage to Iranian drone production capacity? Type R for the response was right-scaled. Type L for larger was necessary. Make your case below. Drone attacks achieved 2 effects simultaneously: the physical damage from the warhead and the psychological pressure of persistent threat that the attack pattern imposes on the personnel defending against it. The physical damage from 41 Shahed detonations on a Sunday night was measured and survivable. 3 soldiers wounded, 1 building destroyed, fuel fires extinguished. The psychological pressure of operating in a garrison that had been attacked 9 times in a single night, that could be attacked again at the same scale or larger, that had saved itself by a margin of 1 partial intercept hitting a storage building instead of a personnel facility. That pressure is not measured in damage assessments. It is measured in the quality of sleep of the garrison's 200 soldiers in the weeks after the attack, and in the operational decisions of the commanders who understood that the defense had been adequate on Sunday by the narrowest possible margin and was being improved on a timeline measured in months while the threat was being rebuilt on a timeline measured in weeks. If this breakdown delivered the analysis you came here for, like the video, share it, and subscribe to my channel. Every drone, every intercept, every target in the response, we build it out completely. What does the IRGCN drone program look like after 4 months of rebuild? And which American counter-UAS development do you think changes the cost exchange calculation most fundamentally? Drop both answers below.